Very good afternoon to you all and welcome. My name is James Lessingham. I am co-chair of APM's Programme Management SIG. I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar today. Today's presentation is entitled The Virtual Journey to the new 5th edition of Managing Successful Programmes, or MSP. This is a really interesting journey and I think one that will resonate with many of us at the moment. Our presenters you see on screen right now, Dr Ruth Murray-Webster, lead editor, and Dr Penny Pullan, co-author, who I will hand over to very shortly. So in this webinar, Ruth and Penny will be sharing their experience of developing the new edition of the Programme Management Framework, introducing some key concepts that update MSP, and we'll share some of their insights into working virtually with a team spread out around the world. So Penny, over to you.
Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar. It's lovely to have you with us. So today we're going to talk about how we work together, both with the team. There were 4 authors, so we've got 2 of us here today, but also with a much wider authoring team and Axelos team and reviewers and everybody to design and deliver the new and updated MSP 5th edition. I suppose there's an assumption when you look at this virtual journey that we must have done this in the pandemic. But actually the authoring part of it was pretty much done, well, certainly my part, by March. I'm sure Ruth was doing quite a bit afterwards as the editor, the lead editor. And we know that the Axelos team and the reviewers were working during the pandemic, but most of the authoring, which is what we're focused on today, was actually done pre-pandemic, but it was still virtual. The whole product, including the exams, was actually delivered on time despite the pandemic coming along. So I think that's pretty impressive, but I can't take any credit for that. I'm sure Ruth can, but the authoring work, the part I did, was done by March. So we're going to start off by Ruth saying some things about this new 5th edition, why she chose me and the other 2 as authors, why she chose us actually, because I must say when she asked me, I was thinking, oh, why me? But then also, how did we come up with the amended framework? Because some things are quite different. And from my perspective, one of the things that we got right, or that Ruth got right, was working with us to get that whole structure and framework in place before then going into more detail. Ruth will also talk about definitions, and we're going to talk about changes as well. So we're going to do that, and I should imagine that it's probably going to take us about half an hour, because you wanted to have lots of time for questions, because real life program managers and others who use this for real, your questions are really valuable and we'd like to answer them for you. So we want to make it as useful as we possibly can. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Ruth now. Over to you.
Thank you, Penny, and lovely to be with you all today. Just a few comments from me, as we start. When I was asked to be lead editor of MSP 5th edition, it was right off the back of me completing APM Body of Knowledge 7th edition. I was a little jaded from that and thought, oh no, not again. But it was too good an opportunity to miss, really. But I'd learned some things from doing Body of Knowledge 7th edition, and one of the things I really wanted to do was get the right authoring team. That's not because it was the wrong authoring team on 7, by the way, please don't anyone think that, but I had an opportunity to shape this from the start in terms of numbers of authors and their experience. I chose Penny not because she's an expert in virtual leadership, although she is. I chose Penny because I'd written with her before. I knew I could write with her, but I also knew that Penny does lots of work to help people analyse and shape and design organisational change, and that was going to be really relevant to some of the changes I wanted to make with MSP. I also chose Andrew Schuster. Some of you might know Andrew. He actually has a claim to fame as being the only person who's been involved in every edition of Managing Successful Programmes so far. He's ex-UK Civil Service, but Andrew now leads a large programme assurance consulting practice in Canada. He's based in Toronto, but works all over the country in Canada. I'm working with a number of major investments that are delivered using MSP. Canada is a big market for MSP. And then I also chose Sue Taylor. And Sue is lives in Australia now. She is British, but has been in the lovely sunny Brisbane, lucky Sue, for many years. Sue's a really experienced trainer of managing successful programs and other Axelos products. And she works with governments and banks and utilities providers and many other organisations. And she hears it firsthand week after week, the practical challenges of implementing an MSP in practice. And at the time in 2019, I was supporting the design and delivery of 2 post-merger and acquisition integration programmes with clients in the US and in Germany. So together, we had great practical experience. But we were all over the world and we needed to deal with that. So I'm going to hand back to Penny now, because she's got a really sort of I guess she was on the end of my mad idea that we could pull this off virtually with this international team. So Penny, back to you.
Okay, here we are. This is us, and in fact it's worth drawing us on. Just so you can get a feeling of the time zones that were involved. So I was in Loughborough, which is slap bang in the middle of England. We had Andrew, who was in Toronto, but spent a little bit of time in London occasionally. So I put a little tiny A there as well. We had Sue, who's based in Brisbane, but some of the time she was actually in Papua New Guinea. So Sue, I'll put another S over here. And then we had Ruth, who some of the time was in the north of England, some of the time was working in the States, and some of the time was working in Germany. So you can see, given that spread, that there really was quite a big challenge for us in terms of working together virtually, and also those wide time zones. Now I had brought some input from the book on virtual leadership, but let's go through and just look at some of the issues. So I went back through my emails just to see what were some of the things that came up. And the very first meeting we did by conference call. It was August last year. And I think the timings, the best time we could get, 10 p.m. in the UK for the start of the call, 5 p.m. Toronto, and then 7 o'clock in the morning for Brisbane. And my comment was, don't expect brilliance from me at that time, but I can see we have a really tricky combination of time zones, so I will accept graciously. But in the end, Andrew couldn't make it because he's so busy and so in demand, and something ran over and he couldn't manage to join us. And that, that happened. It happened quite a lot, that we're all very, very busy people. And I was thinking, oh, how's this going to work? So once we'd had that meeting, we then got set up for how we're going to do it. And Ruth had some high-level plans that actually having that all agreed up front was really helpful, and that really helped us. We also got lots of technology in place. So we had a WhatsApp group that actually ended up being really very helpful because it gave us that informal chat, and we could do that asynchronously, so independent of time zones. If you sent something late our night, then Sue would pick it up when it was her morning, and we'd all end up part of the discussion, even though spaced out in time. We had Teams discussion boards that we use a little bit. We certainly use email, and I use some GoToMeeting, but it meant that we could have transcripts and recordings, which are quite useful. And I did some visual recording as well, so you can see that I'm drawing a little bit on the side. So I made some notes sometimes when we were doing complicated things that would help us see what we were talking about as well. And I think, as I've said many times, getting the structure right first, the principles, the themes, and the processes. We put a lot of time in up front to get those right and to make sure we all understood how we put them together. What worked was that we actually got to know each other as people. We made an effort to talk about things other than just the content. And do jump in, Ruth, if you've got comments about this. So we did get to know each other and what was happening outside of work completely virtually. We had a brilliant editor. Ruth was amazing, and the other two authors were great people, and it was lovely to get to know them a little bit. And the other thing was experience. Between us, we'd worked on a lot of real programs, but we also had Sue's input as a very experienced trainer. I can remember when I was writing, I'd say, you know, what are the aspects around benefits, for example, that people find tricky, and how can we make that simpler? And bouncing ideas off Sue was really helpful. Yeah, and we also all had writing experience, which I think helped. And one thing that was really important was, because of the wide time zones, we did most of the work asynchronously. Now that's a big word, but it means doing things at separate times to suit each of us. And I think that's one of the things that we can really take out of it, that when you're working virtually, you don't have to spend all your time in video calls with everybody on a screen in front of you, because that's the quickest way to get zoomed out, which I think has now entered the language. So a lot of it worked asynchronously. I think writing lends itself to that, but that certainly worked. And we delivered, and it was on time. We did have one face-to-face workshop in January for a day or so. Axelos funded that trip so everyone could be together. And we were so productive that way. We just churned through all the things we needed to get done, didn't we, Ruth? And other than that, we were remote.
I think one of the things I learned from this, just in terms of talking about virtual working and rather than MSP itself, is that, of course, because we had set up the relationships and also the structures to be able to work asynchronously, there were near the end, because of course we were always in a rush near the end, actually being in different parts of the world really helps, because what you've got is 24/7 working. You know, you hand over to someone who's just starting to come to work, etc. So I think just actually in this project, but also in our work, you know, that is probably an underexplored aspect of project-based working, you know, in the 21st century. So just really wanted to mention that. Okay, so let me do some of the official stuff. So, and I should say, and it's very clear on the slide, clearly, you know, MSP is a registered trademark. It's the property of Axelos Limited, and so Penny and I are doing this talk with express permission from Axelos Commercial to share some of their intellectual property. MSP 5th edition was launched on 26th of October. I'm not sure whether any of you have seen it yet. If you go to the next slide, Penny, you'll, oh, a real one. There is no change to the, in the 5th edition, to the idea of the integrated framework of principles, themes and processes. So those of you who are familiar with the 4th edition, principles, they're not exactly the same. I'll say a little bit about changes, but the idea that the guiding principles are universally applicable remains. I think in 4th edition they were called governance themes. We went for one word, themes, but they are about setting up the governance for the programme. But what you'll find is that there are far fewer compulsory elements of governance within 5th edition, particularly documents, a much greater ability to tailor, and I think a clearer definition between programme level governance and governance and practices associated with projects and other work within the programme. That's something that we've tried to do. And then processes used to be called the transformational flow. I think there was a time, and through, you know, maybe the late 90s and the noughties, when programme management was emerging, and I'm sure as practitioners and maybe members of APM programme that you were part of this, that we were all trying really hard to put clear blue water between definitions of things. So that, well, a project's this, so we, there was the whole, projects don't deliver benefits, projects deliver outputs, and only programs deliver benefits. It's a bit last century, or certainly last decade, to think like that. And I think that in earlier versions of MSP, there had been a real attempt to not use words that were used for projects, which is why Axelos talked about the transformational flow. But we've gone back to processes. So you'll see in the middle of that diagram, a cyclical process flow as before. There is a many-to-many relationship between principles, themes, and processes. So I should have said, sorry, for those of you not familiar, the principles around the outside, the outer ring are principles, the inner ring, the middle ring are the governance themes, and then the processes in the middle. And so when we say many-to-many relationship, what we're saying is that some people try to sort of read across. So it doesn't mean that the lead with purpose principle is only applicable in the organisation and design themes. Imagine the things spinning. So every principle is applicable in every theme, and every theme is applicable, and therefore every principle is applicable in every process. And I think one of the things we worked really hard on, Penny, but I think we've got right, is having loads of really clear tables to show those relationships between principles and themes and processes. Just to say that with the processes, the same progressive delivery of the target operating model. We've ditched blueprint, was very misleading for lots of people. Practice uses the term, talks about operating models and either target or future operating models. So we talk about progressive delivery of the target operating model in tranches. We kept the tranche word. We'd have liked a different one, but we couldn't think of a better one, so ended up sticking with tranche. But we reintroduced or introduced the concept of landing points, but really this is just a different term for those of you who remember MSP of old, that used to call islands of stability. I loved islands of stability. The idea that at the end of a tranche, you might not have finished everything, but the end of a tranche is a safe place to stop. That if the organisation didn't want to invest any further, there is coherent capability at the end of the tranche so that the organisation could stop there. So we've introduced the concept of landing points. So just a few more bits from me. I thought it might be useful just to talk about definitions. Definitions debates are boring, but we need definitions. So let me just build up how, and we worked on this for ages, didn't we, Penny? Just, a long
ages.
time. That's right.
Ages.
Yes, but I just want to build this up for you. So there are 4 different points. So the first point, and we start off by saying a programme is a temporary structure. So we know that some programmes are very closely linked to work in business as usual operations. Many of them span many years, but nevertheless, they are temporary structures. Temporary structures that are designed to lead, second point, multiple interrelated projects and other work. So we've used other work, not business as usual. That was a bit of a debate as well, but the idea is that programs don't necessarily contain all projects. And also this point that I put here, nor just one mode of delivery. So Axelos used the term multimodal delivery to refer to projects within a program. Some of them might be following a linear life cycle, some of them might be following an iterative life cycle, some might be following hybrid life cycles, using APM terminology there. But if you prefer waterfall or agile, I don't, but you'll know what I mean. Multiple interrelated projects and other work, they're not just one mode of delivery, but working together in order to, and the third point is, progressively achieve outcomes of benefits. Again, every word hotly debated, We wanted to get the sense of incremental cycles with landing points where it was safe to stop, made that point already. There was lots of talk about enterprise agility. You know, managing successful programs is not an agile method, it's not an agile way of working, but it does enable that flexibility and adaptability that often people call enterprise agility or corporate agility nowadays. And we also use this phrase outcomes of benefit, because we know that programs deliver outcomes and they're measured you know, by benefits or disbenefits. And so I think there was a time when we called them beneficial outcomes, and then our market research, our reviewers said they didn't like beneficial outcomes, so we went to outcomes benefit. And then the fourth point of this is that a program does all this. It's a temporary structure designed to lead multiple interrelated projects in other work in order to progressively achieve outcomes of benefit for one or more organisations. And we use the term investing organisation quite freely through this, but you know, noting that programs are often not bounded within one organisation or part of an organisation, and absolutely require collaboration across boundaries to which is one of the principles. I'm just Ashok, I'm just going to pick up this question. Why change the name of the words? It will cause confusion, as we have all been used to the previous names and understand them very well. And that's a really great great challenge. And I think there's another question that's coming too about organisations who are really used to 4th edition. What would be the benefits of transitioning to 5th edition? So I will say some more about that. But I think all I would say is that, you know, it wasn't about changing names for the sake of it. We were reflecting really what we were experiencing in practice, that some of the terminology that organisations, whether they were using MSP or not, were using in practice. I mean, target operating model is a classic around that. So we yeah, so that's why we did what we did, and I understand some might be confused, but I guess it's called, some will call it progress, some might debate that progress is useful.
Ruth, if I can jump in just to say, it was a rewrite, wasn't it? It wasn't a sort of let's just tweak and polish and update a little bit. It was a rewrite, this edition.
It was 10 years after the last edition, and the view was that in 10 years, you know, our profession had developed quite a long way, not just in organisations who were using MSP, but just the whole practice of programmatic change was, you know, had moved on, and the MSP needed to reflect that. But anyways, you know, I don't want this to be a justification, really, more of an explanation. So do challenge, because, you know, I'm really welcome for that. So just moving on, I thought it might be useful. Some of you might like to see both the APM definition of a programme and the MSP definition of a programme side by side. And you might say, why are they so different? You wrote both of them, Ruth. You know, there are reasons why the APM one is as it is. There's reasons why the MSP one is as it is. As a practitioner and as someone who was, you know, the lead author of both of them, they're saying the same things. I don't see any difference whatever between what we've done in managing successful programs and any view that that APM would have about program management. They're just described using different words. So just now that I know there are lots of questions coming in about changes, so I've just got one more slide, and maybe if I go through that, and then we can start picking up some of your questions. So a few things that I wanted to say here. Just in overview, I think I remember really starting to think about program management and write about program management in the late 1990s. I know I co-authored a chapter with Michel Thierry in the Gower Handbook of Project Management in 1999, and a lot of the really groundbreaking work that Sergio Pellegrinelli did in the 90s around types of programme. And really ever since then, programme management and MSP in particular has tried to provide that bridge between the project view of the world and the strategic organisational view of the world. And I think for me, previous editions have in too many ways seemed like too much of a project-based view. So so almost like building up from a project mindset rather than reflecting enough of a business mindset. So my motivation as lead author was to refresh MSP. I absolutely wanted to build on great prior work. There was nothing wrong with the 4th edition, and indeed the 3rd edition was great. That was one I used to really like. So to build on great prior work, not destroy it, but also to reflect more of a balance between the project and the organisational view. And so some of the changes reflect that. So we've got lots of content that is the same, but we've also got content that might be seen as new, or maybe we're giving a little bit more emphasis to. So I've just got 6 points that I wanted to make here, and then I'll answer your questions. So the first thing, we have a theme called governance themes before, but a theme that we've called justification. The 4th edition talks about business case, and this is about business case, but it's about more than business case, because it's about the early parts of the life cycle when you're building, the mandate and the brief, leading through to the business case, but making much more of a deal about not just how initially, but how on an ongoing basis you're making sure that the programme is affordable and achievable and worth it in its widest sense, in terms of the value it's trying to create, that those trade-offs of benefits, costs and risks. So we've got and there's some content in that section that is really quite new from MSP, taking that organisational viewpoint about making sure that the programme's affordable, achievable. The second point that I wanted to make here is then we've also got this theme that we've called the decisions theme. We wanted to do something that we call decisions because, obviously there's lots and lots of reporting that needs to go on, backwards looking reporting, but the whole why report? Well, we report so that we can make decisions about whether to carry on as we are or change tack in some way. And also that for me, decision making over time is not just about looking back and saying how we're doing versus our plan, but particularly in programs that are spanning long times, that we're really open to that wider organisational context, that we're looking forward, that we're looking at emergent risks, at disruptive trends, we're looking how the world is changing around us, and that we're able to deal with that. So the decisions theme, does deal with looking back and reporting and all the good things that we would do to manage progress, but also looks forward. Okay, the third point, we have a principle called realise measurable benefits, and some of the howls of horror when MSP 5th edition was released is, why haven't you got a theme about benefits? You're underplaying benefits. And all I would say is, I don't think we're underplaying benefits. It's absolutely not our intention to underplay benefits. Because benefits is a principle, it applies in every theme and in every process. So we say something about realising measurable benefits in all 7 themes and in all 7 processes. And so obviously a really critical focus on realising measurable benefits within programme management. The fourth point I wanted to make on here, the fourth change, we have something that we've called the design theme. So obviously really important to be able to design the future state in a way that is coherent and allows then when you're starting to structure to plan implementation in tranches and define landing points in a sensible way. So the planning piece, how you how you actually plan the constituent work is done in the structure theme, but design is very much about that. It's about that design of the target the vision, the target operating model. It's about really understanding, really identifying benefits, and also in design is a piece about is where you would do risk identification, and which leads on to the next change really, because some other house of horrors is where's the risk theme? You haven't got a risk theme. And again, as with benefits, we called, you might say, why didn't you call it risk? Lots of reasons for that, but risk thinking runs through the framework. We used ambiguity to reflect that the nature of risk in programmes is mainly about what we don't know. So actually that need to understand what we don't know, to understand uncertainty and risk, and to be able to deal with that throughout the programme is something that is a principle, so it applies in everything and in every process. And then finally, in terms of changes, major changes, we need to do all of that within a governance framework that, yes, is risk-based, but is also providing assurance and driving continual improvement. All this is far more tailorable than in previous editions, and we obviously need assurance to provide confidence to the investing organisations that they're getting what they need from this. And I think some quite contemporary thinking about knowledge, about tacit knowledge, about explicit knowledge, but also in the knowledge theme is the work on information management within the programme. So that's all I'd planned to say about major changes, and I see that there are lots of questions now that we can pick up. So I'm just looking at Andrew's questions. And Penny, chip in, please, if you. So in terms of practical application, can you outline the main areas of change? Hopefully I've made a start on that, Andrew, if not completely finished it. Would MSP 4th edition still be a better methodology to follow and implement in organisations that do not have very mature PPM models, as wider experience and lessons are available? I don't think so. Particularly, I think if an organisation is used to using 4th edition, there is absolutely a choice that organisation needs to make about if and when it will transition to 5th edition. But it's not that different, and absolutely you don't need to, it's not that 4th edition suits immature organisations and 5th edition need. In fact, I would say with 5th edition, it's far more tailorable. There's far less that you have to do. So actually, for for organisations that are haven't got great PPM maturity, but need to. So we used a scenario of a small charity undergoing a major change within the guide. An organisation that would have really very little in place in terms of project and programme management, but MSP is really tailorable and quite, it's been designed to help people be more nimble, more flexible. So that'd be my view. I don't know about you, Penny.
Yeah, can I jump in and just say that it's been fascinating because obviously we finished writing and then the pandemic hit. And for me, what's been really interesting is to think about, I've been so immersed in this, and then the pandemic hit and organizations were having to change, and thinking, actually, could we have done things differently? Could we have made it better for this world where everything is changing so fast? And I think actually that the 5th edition is for this time, is written for now. Okay, we didn't know the pandemic was coming, but it's written in a way that is more flexible. So, and as Ruth says, that you know, there's less that you have to do. So perhaps for an organisation coming in, I would say it's probably the better one, and it's written for the context, the time that we're in, as opposed to a decade ago.
And certainly where the programme is, you know, is bringing about, you know, real strategic change in the organisation. For organisations that are in a context that have been disrupted, and the organisation is having to adapt strategically. The programme is the vehicle for doing that. It's not some, you know, huge monolithic big project. It's a true programme where you know, just getting the tranches right and the landing points right will really matter. Yeah, Andrew asks, are there any aspects of MSP 5th edition that may prove difficult for an organisation already using MSP 4 to adapt to? I don't believe that that's the case. That there is the change in language. So, you know, if you're working in an organisation that absolutely loves the terminology of blueprints, it might be a bit annoying that 5th edition calls it target operating model, but it's the same sort of idea. We've actually expanded the concept of target operating model to be much more about, you know, an entire operating model, made that a little bit clearer. So picking up, you know, things like culture, not just processes and organisation structures, etc. I don't think that there would be any particular barriers. I think what we've tried to do is make explicit the things that should have been happening anyway. But I don't know, Penny, can you think of anything that might be problematic?
I think it's just getting used to some new language, but if we didn't change things for the sake of changing things. So for example, the blueprint and the target operating model, that fell within my area. And thinking of all the programs that I've been involved with, I hadn't heard anyone talk of a blueprint for a while. That target operating model was the term more commonly in use. The blueprint, to me, I imagine, and it may be my generation, but I imagine, you know, a huge engineering drawing that's hard to change, and for many organizations, they're already using target operating model. And we're quite keen for people to call them target operating model as opposed to Tom, reducing it down to Tom and talking about, oh, you know, Tom. Somebody said that they'd heard other people in the program talking about Tom for ages, and they're wondering who Tom was. And it took them a little while to realize it was target operating model, but yeah.
But it's true, and certainly when I was in my last practitioner role between 2015 2018, when I was director of the change portfolio at Associated British Ports, target operating model was the language of our CEO and our senior managers. You know, blueprint might have been more the language of people who were steeped in project thinking. But you know, operating model was the language of the senior team, and so again, you know, we've tried to make that clear that programs are strategic endeavours, and you need your senior teams to understand them, and so some of the language changes is around that. Now, okay, I'm just going to work down the questions one by one. And Ram said, why is the pass mark for 5th edition 60% and not 50 as in the 4th edition? So first of all, just to say, I'm nothing to do with examinations as lead editor. I was involved in the syllabus and some level of assurance around question writing, but not the pass mark. But I do know that the pass mark is set through a really rigorous moderation process. So the exams are beta tested. I actually ran one of the beta testing sessions, so a training course that then exams were taken, and the pass mark comes out of that process. But I'm afraid I'm not able to tell you just exactly how that works, and that would need to be a question for Axelos, or maybe the accredited providers know the answer to that question, but I'm not an accredited provider, so sorry, I can't help. Why are the exams not all not paper-based?
I
right,
think they're
are you saying why are they not all online? Again, I don't know. I don't even know the split of online or paper. It's not my area. I'm really sorry. I can't add to that one. But I'm glad you love tranches. It certainly. I think that is a word that we've just got used to what it means, and we thought of slice and chunk and other words, but people did tend to love tranches. Okay, so Kelly said, I've recently bought online training for foundation practitioner, but it's 4th edition. I have to say I am really astounded that the training providers are continuing to offer training to 4th edition when 5th is out. But if you've already done your practitioner, if you've already done your foundation at 4th edition, Kelly, I'd carry on, because your qualification will count. You know, if you pass your practitioner, you will be an MSP practitioner for the 5-year period, even if it's to 4th edition. So I'm disappointed this is happening, but it's again, you know, that's down to the accredited providers to offer what they think that people will buy. Ashok said, is there a book or article that can help some of us experienced MSP users make the move to 5th edition? Looking for terms and changes, or do I have to buy the whole book and learn it all over again? I admit it should not be different, but it would help to get a bridge paper to help us. Yeah, so Axelos do have some of these resources. I've certainly written with John Edmonds, who heads up the PPM portfolio at Axelos. John and I have written, it's about a 6-page long, you know, much more detailed than I've given you now, summary of what's changed. So I'm happy to take an action actually, and to come back to people with what the status of that document is. And I know Axelos have got many other, you know, I've done podcasts, and there are other white papers and all sorts of resources that Axelos are producing to try and help people make that transition from 4th to 5th edition. Obviously, when your accreditation expires, if you you know, if you want to remain an MSP practitioner, then you'd need to do something with 5th edition. But clearly, it's not important that people take exams all over again. I would never suggest that. I think there is a document, Ashok, and we'll find out where that is.
Penny here, just to say, if you search for MSP 5th edition, what has changed, Axelos, then you get a nice update from John.
Well done, Penny.
On their blog, which it should be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know John and I have done a podcast on that that's going to be out on the 15th of December. So there are actually lots of resources to support this that John and the team at Axelos are sort of pumping out all the time, because obviously we want experienced users of MSP to you know, to be able to get their heads around this, as well as you know, people who are new to the framework.
Oh, we've got one from Merv and another one from Ram.
Okay, so Merv asked the question, how does this fit in with management of portfolios, where the last edition was 2011? It's a fine question, Merv. I know that Axelos are thinking about the rest of the PPM portfolio now as we speak, so in their business planning. So I'm expecting that there will be some changes next year, but I don't know the detail of that. But you know, just to say that when we were doing the structuring of this, we were very clear that MSP was not in any way intended to supersede or neither supersede nor contradict what is in management of portfolios, but acknowledging, yes, it's nearly 10 years old now, so may warrant a refresh, and that's something that John's thinking about. Thank you, Ram, and yeah, thank you, Ashok. I'm glad you found that. Glad you found that article. Hopefully that will be useful for you. What else can we help you with?
Lots of thank yous coming in, which is lovely. Thank you.
Might we say we're done then if there are no more questions?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much both. A really great session, and I hope all of our attendees today have enjoyed it and got something out of it. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Just one final bit from me and a ProgM SIG point of view. We are very keen to hear your point of view and get people involved in what we're doing at the moment. So if you would like to contribute, if you would like to help us out in the SIG, please do drop us an email at programsig@apm.org.uk, and we'll happy to chat and talk to you about some of the things we've got coming up and things you may be able to support us and contribute to. So we'd love to hear from you. But if that's everything today, I'd like to thank again Penny and Ruth for that session, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you so much for all the thanks pouring in. All the best as you use MSP5.